And today, this is the 18th Barichara Updates call, with 2 that we were unable to have, or maybe 3 that we were unable to have for various scheduling conflicts over the last several months. So we're really rocking this. And I'm so happy to be creating an archive, a public record archive of a bioregional regeneration process. As I watch the bioregional regeneration summit that's happening right now, which I have only attended my session and listened in on one other. So I have not been paying much attention as I've had so much going on the home front, but I still sense too much talking and not enough showing what we're doing. And I hope there's a lot more of that just I didn't see. So today we'll be showing some of what we're doing, as we always do in these updates. And so that means that I want to begin with a little bit of a slideshow to give you some pictures, but I'm going to keep it shorter this time because I had 2 people who requested to share. Ricardo Palomino, who is visiting, who's here with us from Venezuela, who's a Colombian but is in Venezuela. And then Penny has something she wants to share. And then we'd like to have an open discussion. But I suspect that the presentation, the way I framed it, will create a nice landing point for Ricardo and Penny to land into. And so, so what I want to do right now is enter into the presentation mode, because I think the last 2 weeks that we did this, I didn't show very many pictures, and I want to make up for that. So, so let's just jump right into that, and then we'll come back to have some other sharing right afterwards. So, first of all, I'm getting good at taking pictures. This is a photo I took the other morning, 2 mornings ago, of the centropic agriculture system. This is the one in the bioparque that's about 6 months old. It's kind of incredible to watch all the layers and structures in half a year. I won't say a lot about what's happening with centropic agriculture right now, because there's a bigger picture context I want to paint. And the way that I've decided to name the theme for today's conversation is, how are we catalyzing projects with outside help? And so, as you'll see in the next few slides, we're actually creating a conversational container for multiple kinds of collaboration. And because there's so many kinds of collaboration going on, I can't possibly share them all with you. I just want to give you a flavor of it. And this is partly because after the Refi Barichara event, which ended only 3 weeks ago, we've already created the Bioregional Activators platform. We have about 80 people on the platform. We're already forming active relationships with bioregions in Colorado, where Penny and I are going a week from tomorrow. And then also with Osa Peninsula, with Trisha Stapleton and Iris, their team that's been really with Regenerosa, which has been very connected with bioregional catalysts. And we're exploring having a trip to go visit them in January. And so we're starting to create active collaborations and learning exchanges between bioregions, which means we need to learn how to be coherent. How can we be coherent when a bioregion seeks outside help? And how can the outside help catalyze local projects without harming them? And how can the local projects catalyze relationships to the outside world in a mutually beneficial way? And those of you who have been following our conversations about Refi Barichara and the way that we manage that whole process, we've been very, very mindful about how we honor the relationships in both directions. So what I want to share with you today is the beginnings of a container. The beginnings, because we're going to be learning how to do this for a long time. So this is just like a conversational scaffold to begin exploring together what we're practicing doing. With that in mind, I'm not sure how many of you saw this. This is a graphic that I created about 2 weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, after Penny had finished doing all of the financial analysis of how much money came in for Refi Barichara and where it went. And I created this graphic, which slightly annoyed her because she, being a numbers nerd who, I'm more like a patterns nerd and she's more of a numbers nerd. She's the bookkeeper. She didn't like that I rounded. But anyway, the key insight was this, that with Refi Barichara, we ended up mobilizing about $6,000 US into the territory, and 100% of it went to local projects. And so what you can see here is that 32% of the money that came in from the outside, which was from donations and from the pledge community, and most of it, about 2/3 of it, came from ticket sales for the event itself. 32% of the money that we spent on the event went to field site visits, which means that we gave money to the people running local projects to give tours. So if someone went to the Bioparque, Camila and Vicky received money for the Bioparque by being tour guides. When people went to Casa Común, which is a local community kitchen and community store, the money went to Casa Común. When people went to Ojo de Agua, the group that does regenerative education with theater and documentaries, we paid them and the money went to their local project. So about 1/3 of all of the money, approximately $2,000, if you do your math, went directly to projects in the form of paying people to promote and popularize their projects. So we reversed marketing. We paid them to market their projects and gave them money to support their projects. About 30% of the money went to meals and snacks, which was all to local food producers and local cooks and local restaurants. And so we gave the money to the local economy in the form of 2/3 of this money, about almost $4,000 of it, went to local regenerative projects, to food producers by buying food products and by paying local chefs. About 10% of the money went to medicine women holding rituals and ceremonies for us. 17% went to the local organizing team, the Earth Regenerators organizing team, which includes Penny, Antonio, and myself. I don't know if there are others on the call at the moment that were part of the organizing team, like Lilian and Jacob and Tyler. There was a group of us who are non-local organizers. We were not paid. And so the local organizers received all of the money, and the venue being the hotel, which is a local business. So I just wanted you to see that this way of catalyzing projects with outside help was deeply integrated into the business model, the way that money moved for the Refi Barichara event. So I just wanted you to see that as a living expression of how outside help can catalyze local projects. This is something we did. It was hugely successful and created a lot more value than the flow of money. But even just looking at the flow of money, this is regenerative finance in action. But we also did this. So one of the things we talked a lot about during Refi Barichara, we talk a lot about it in the Barichara Updates, is that we need to cultivate bioregional governance among a diversity of actors and exploring many different themes. And in our case in Barichara, this is the Territorial Foundation, which is a convener who holds the territory development as a whole and is continually mobilizing resources in service to holistic health. As we've talked about the Barichara Ecoversity and other learning activities, we always focus on how integrative to make them between projects and that their purpose is to weave the territory. This also creates an entry point for outsiders to engage. So what the Barichara Ecoversity does is it says, well, as you arrive to the Barichara Ecoversity, you have an entry point into the learning exchanges of the territory, but on the terms of the local people. And also this allows for an inward focus of the local projects organizing themselves around their collective dreams so that they can articulate them back to the outside world for things like fundraising, where local projects can tell their stories to the outside world in a way that those from the outside could bring resources to them. And that's what I want to talk about now, which is this. Within bioregional activators at this moment, we are taking an idea that was born in Refi Barichara, but actually was previously born in the Earth Regenerators Fund, and was before that, born into the Barichara Regeneration Fund, which is how do we create collaborative frameworks for funding and governance where teams form that mobilize resources of various kinds. And in particular, tomorrow we have a call within bioregional activators where members of that community are going to talk about how they can mobilize resources for Bioparque Moncura, for our work in syntropic agriculture, for the work of Casa Común and the local food systems, for the work of regenerative education in various ways, and for the Territorial Foundation. What this means is that we are creating frameworks of collaboration at the moment being hosted by Penny and myself until they form into self-organizing teams that will be able to direct them towards something like the Bioparque has needs. How do they ask the outside world for help? The work we're doing in syntropic agriculture is so important. How do we tell its story and mobilize resources in funding and other kinds, like teachers from Brazil or whatever else may be needed? And how do we bring them into collaboration with local projects? You can already see at the pattern level that this way of holding conversations could apply to any other bioregion on Earth. And it's really important to remember that we're prototyping in Barichara ways of collaborating that then have their own contextual versions in other landscapes. So for example, there's the Barichara Community Learning Centropede together. And I just want you to see this little video. This is from yesterday. I just want you to feel the energy of what learning looks like in Barichara. Okay, so the guy that's laughing there is Paco. He's the syntropic agriculture teacher. And this is a workshop at the Huerta Comunitaria, the community garden, where they're setting up a new syntropic agriculture site, and everyone is doing a technical field site visit to learn pruning. So they're pruning all the trees to prepare space for other plants and vegetation to come in underneath. But I just wanted you to feel the energy. Let's do that again, shall we? This is what it feels like to grow a forest. So I wanted you to have a sense of that, because when we talk about how is the community responding, they're laughing and giggling and working their butts off and forming deep friendships and just having a blast. All right, so this is another thing that happened in the last week. Last Friday, our friends Milena and Felipe gathered together representatives of different educational initiatives to present Pasos de Agua, which is the steps of water. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to present a vision for designing a regenerative education strategies for pedagogy and curricula about restoring the entire 30,000 hectare watershed of the Barichara River, working with teachers and children. And so this is an example of how the children are learning how to teach the adults to care for water and land. And they're creating educational strategies that link across all of the educational activities in the territory. And you can imagine how powerful a story like this will be for the rest of the world to learn about. And so therefore, how important it is to successfully fundraise for this project to unfold and happen. So you can see that catalyzing a project like this with outside help means that the outsiders benefit from all of the learning that occurs to learn how children can lead the restoration of watersheds anywhere else on Earth. And I just wanted you to know that this is this kind of collaboration. And this collaboration arose through funding from the Barichara Regeneration Fund, which funded Felipe's work on 2 occasions in the last year, and is currently funding his collaborative partner, Milena Reyes, as she is leading educational design and weaving these educational partners on behalf of the territory as a way of creating a community fund for children and families. So Pasos de Agua is a project led by Felipe and Milena that has been receiving support from Earth Regenerators, financial support, for about 1.5 years in various forms. And the outside resources have been catalyzing their ability to dream this big. And now as they manifest it, they're going to ask for outside support again. Felipe is about to send me a budget for the first year so that we can do collaborative fundraising for this project. So you can see that the local people are organizing themselves with outside support. And as they mobilize themselves, they can, in an empowered and equal way, they can collaborate with outsiders to move these projects forward and to share their learnings with the world. Also, just so you can see it, the Barichara River is these blue lines are only 3 of the tributaries. There are 15 tributaries of the Barichara River. I just want you to see how denuded and deforested the landscape is. Restoring this 30,000 hectare drainage means reforesting about 10% of our entire territory. So this educational initiative is of huge ecological importance. It's going to be incredibly complex. And I just wanted you to know that this is happening. My metaphor for the way that we're thinking about these relationships is embodied in this seed. These are the seeds of a native tree. The locals call it guamo macho. We don't know the scientific name of this tree. We don't even know if it exists anywhere else on Earth, because of endemism. So many species only exist here. But what I want you to notice is that the seed is sitting inside of a pod, which means the pod is locally holding and containing the potential of the seed. So imagine the seed as a regenerative project. The local people are holding the regenerative potential of the seed until it's ready to open itself. And that orange covering around the seed is why the birds come and eat it. The birds like to eat that covering. And notice the shape. To eat that orange covering, the bird has to eat the seed. But the seed will not germinate unless it goes through the digestive tract of a bird that scratches the outer shell, activating the germination process. Now think of this as a metaphor. A local project emerges and has a seed of regenerative potential. But if it doesn't entice the outside world, like the birds, to come and carry it away, consume it, ingest it, transform it, and then release the seed into the world in a changed form, that can be planted into the territory itself. It's in this way that we need to figure out how to create collaborative relationships between what is outside of the tree and what is inside of the seed. And this is something we're learning how to do in Barichara that we want to bring to other bioregions. And with that in mind, the purchase of Las Albercas is happening right now. Yesterday, we completed half of the payments for the purchase of the land. And Friday or probably Monday, we will have the land deed in hand after we've made the final payment. So this is an example of a 2-year process where in the first year, I was telling the story of the future home of Barichara Ecoversity. Then we had an Earth Regenerators member become the donor. It took that donor a full year to get the money to us and a full year to engage in a very difficult transformational negotiation, culminating in within the next week, Las Albercas will be completed and the purchase will be done. So you could think of Las Albercas offering itself like a seed to the world, being enticing to an outsider, to internalize it into themselves, to then carry it into the world to be transformed and planted back into the land again. And this is actually happening. This is happening right now. So this way of collaborating between regenerative projects and the outside world is with us. And so as we look at projects like these, the 4 that I'd already mentioned, syntropic agriculture, regenerative education, the Territorial Foundation, Bioparque Moncora, the Barichara Ecoversity itself, Ori Hindalagua, and other projects. And we have to ask ourselves, how are we going to raise funds for all of these projects to sustain them over time? We're about to begin raising funds in a collaborative way, unlike anything we've done before. And as these projects are bringing their budgets to us, we're finding that the scale of funding that we need is $300,000 to $400,000 for 2 years just to sustain these projects. So when you hear Common Land Foundation say, you need a minimum of 500,000 euros per year, they're not kidding. We're talking about $200,000 per year to support a subset of projects in our territory without guaranteeing that we supported our core team. So the scales of money that we talk about are very powerful. For example, Bioparque Moncora is asking for about $25,000 for 2 years, but I actually think they need 50. Centropic Agriculture is preparing a budget of about $90,000 per year to sustain their territorial scale activities. Just to give you a sense. So when we start looking at how to integrate these projects and sustain them for the longer term, they do accumulate a substantial amount of investment and they generate a huge amount of value. So the question becomes, how do we activate bioregions in this way? If we're to come into a place like Barichara, where there's deep trust, a large number of projects, frameworks of collaboration like the Territorial Foundation or Centropic Agriculture or the Barichara Ecoversity, all of which are creating patterns of collaboration. And then we work with the outside world to gather and mobilize resources of different kinds. How can we do this both in Barichara and in Osa Peninsula, and in the Front Range of Colorado, and in Cascadia, and in any other bioregion that needs to do this? This is the work of bioregional activators, which is the new community that we're just starting to build that'll be doing this work. And I want to stop the presentation now and invite Ricardo and Penny to share. So then we can start having a discussion I suspect that Ricardo's sharing will be related to how we can collaborate between outsiders and locals. So I'd love, if Ricardo, if you're ready, I'd love to invite you to share first and then pass to Penny and then open to discussions. So Ricardo, si estás listo, por favor, bienvenido.
I'm ready. Thank you, Joe. Well, I want to introduce something that's already happening in the Provincia Guanentina. This is one of the names of the province where the Barichara and Mogotes they are set. There's a project of the UNESCO and la Gobernación de Santander, the state government of Santander, to create the canyon of El Cañón de Chicamocha, the Chicamocha Canyon, to raise it to a level of human patrimony.
Like a World Heritage Site, yes? Isn't it a World Heritage Site or something like this?
Can you hear me okay? Sorry?
Yes, yes. Isn't it like a World Heritage Site? Something of that scale?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, something of that scale. So there's a team already working on that. And an uncle of mine, Ariel, he is the anthropologist in charge of all the research of the cultural history and the archaeological sites. So I've been talking to him. So I want to make a visit again to Mogotes and Barichara. And he just nailed that I could be a companion for, he has a task of mapping the archaeological sites of the Guano culture around the Cañón de Chicamocha. And I answered him back saying that, yeah, I love that, but if we could extend that invitation to this community. So there are some field trips around the area. He is beginning already. He is creating the schedule. So he might set the visits around Barichara for December. And that's it. I just wanted to, extend that possibility to you. So anyone interested in the community could join these field visits. And maybe there's a chance of, many other possibilities. It's just, I leave it here on the table, and I hope it's worth trying. So,
No, muchas gracias, Ricardo. I'm going to connect you with an anthropologist named Monica Geidelman-Reyes, who's at the University of Santander in Bucaramanga. And she has worked for the last 10 years with archaeological sites surrounding Mesa de los Santos. And so she is already connected to a research network doing a lot of this work. And so it'll be very relevant to what you're doing. And I'd already told Ariel that I needed to connect him, but if I introduce you, then you can connect him with Monica. She did her PhD at Cambridge and then had a professorship or what do they call it, where she was a teacher at Oxford as well. And she's Colombian and is wonderful. So I'll connect you with Monica to coordinate this because it's super important. Muchas gracias, hermano. I want to replace the spotlight so that Penny can share.
Hey, everybody. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening with Las Albercas, but more like on like the inner level, like what it takes to do this kind of a thing. What I've been observing, being here and being a part of this, and also so sort of the inner and the spiritual aspect. I'm just going to talk about three things with Dan, who's the donor, with Joe, and with the land itself. So the quality in both, well, first of all, I'll just say Dan and Joe, they couldn't have done it without each other. Like what I'm seeing is like this deep brotherhood over 2 years or however long this has been, with this quality of devotion that is just like incredible. I've never seen anything like it. Devotion, they hold that in different ways, but both of them hold this devotion to seeing it through. And they've supported each other in that when each of them has been discouraged, to say the least.
In the bowels of despair.
Yeah, in despair, and just, I mean, it's just been this trial for both of them. And Dan in his own way with his own situation in California, and just continuing to come back and say, no, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do, and holding his dream, his personal dream, but the dream for the land as well, and the community. And Joe in his own way having to just like continually let go and let the land guide the way, and continually let it die in himself. And then Dan coming back and saying, we're going to do this together, we can do it. It's just like this beautiful relationship that's been incredible to witness. And it's like for me, it's like what a hero really is. These two men are heroes to me. And then the land itself is actually at the at the heart of this. The land is how do I say this? It's spoke to Joe like in a moment and invited him on. It feels like this trial on this trial of 2 years, and for all the people involved. And so it feels like this reversal, like the land is, the one thing I'm realizing is that this land can never be owned. It's never been owned, and it's not going to be owned by anybody. The land owns us, really. That's not the right word, but it can never be owned, and it's not about money. It's like there's nothing about, it's like this reversal of, we're not buying the land, like the land is allowing us the privilege to be there. And, this trial was a part of that, I feel. So I just wanted to share that it feels so significant. It's like, it's not just this little piece of land, and we bought a piece of land, but it's like this deep spiritual process and a seed, like Joe was saying, but just the devotion, like what to hold that devotion in the midst of the personal challenges both of them are going through is not common, let's just say. And it's so I think that it's just significant in that way, the deep spiritual significance of this I wanted to share and express. Yeah, it's been an honor being part of it.
Mm. Antonio, please.
Well, on the flip side of that spiritual experience, I'm just thinking of all the people who have been refinancing their homes and flipping homes, and kind of this degenerative mind virus that's taken hold. And to see this as an example of what's possible, I think that's going to be really powerful in the coming months and years as we kind of head into this housing market crash 2.0. So I just appreciate everything that's happening, and it's just beautiful to see it all coming together, and just keep the faith and more power on our journey forward.
Hear, hear. So I'd love to just open up now to a discussion, but anything that you'd like to share or questions you'd like to ask. And part of the context of this moment is that we are entering into a new phase of all of this work. And I don't just mean Penny and me or Barichara or Earth Regenerators. I mean, all of us. Can't you just feel it? Can't you just feel it everywhere? Like all of us. And one thing that I see really happening now is the pathway that is created by sovereignty by the individual to show up and do whatever is needed is what will carve the future. And all of the ways that most of us are captured by our own emotional baggage and captured by our own sort of coping mechanisms of trauma is why most of us will not be sovereign through this. Just thinking statistically, most of humanity will not be sovereign. But those who are will have the power to shape the future. And that is very true from now onward, from this moment forth. Like Dan and me coming together to help Las Albercas become what it's going to become is sovereign. It was absolutely, like, just to give you a sense, for those who don't remember or who don't know, Las Albercas began 2 weeks after I'd been to the land that we bought as Origen del Agua. 2 weeks later, my friend Yoop sends me a message and says, "Hey, Joe, I heard you're raising money to buy some land. I don't know if you could help, but I heard someone with chainsaws on the land next door. I think they're cutting it down to parcelize it and build housing development. Is there any way you could help?" And through that process in the next couple months, I actually played the honest imposter, which is I entered into a land purchase as a buyer without any money, where they already had, the seller had a purchase agreement with another buyer who had made a down payment, and we went and talked to the buyer to see if we could buy out his purchase agreement without any money. I showed up to say, "You're in a complicated mess. You made your down payment. You're not going to finish the payment. You're going to lose your down payment. And I can buy it out from you, except I don't have any money. I'd have to go raise the money, but we'd have to agree to a price." Like, just think of how insane that is. Like, I had not, this was before we bought Origen del Agua. I had never bought a piece of land in my life. I'd never bought a house, nothing. Actually, I had a principled position that I would never in my life own land, because I was so against colonization of land. And there I was saying, "I'll buy this land with money I don't have if you'll just hand over your contract." So I just wanted you to feel that. That's where this began. And that was so inspiring that it caused a donor to emerge a year later. So for the first year, I was in all those maneuvers of negotiations without any money. And so, just to give you a sense of what it means to be sovereign, is all of the signals that told me what I was doing was crazy were irrelevant, because I just knew it was necessary. It was necessary, so I was going to do it no matter how crazy it was. Just to give you a feel for what sovereignty is like. So, yeah, Brian, please.
Yeah, Joe, Penny, I think kind of along these same lines. My focus is shifting, kind of by others' example like your own, and as a process of adapting and better adapting to what the kind of the scale and the magnitude of the actualities with which I'm engaged in and working. For me, and it's kind of a long story to get to this point, but that puts me in a position, but theoretically, okay, that the strength of my background with the integral perspective, as we might refer to it, but in the way that Penny is referring to it as inner process or inner development. In your story, Joe, I'm really intrigued by your capacity to feel into that relational scenario where the accuracy of your perception of where other parties or principles are at in this process, and kind of navigating, assuming the responsibility for navigating that interpersonal, transpersonal field with a good deal of mastery. So that I come from this background. I mean, starting in Southern California real estate and finance in 1972. So I'm no stranger to it, but 4 or 5 decades later. So that's the question, Joe, if you could just kind of address that, and with your sensitivity to the respective states of consciousness, I think, kind of what we understand in more theoretical terms, that's kind of the responsibility I'm holding at this point. Thanks.
Well, I'll answer at two levels. One is that the depth to which I have accepted planetary collapse, the depth to which I was in the grief and the despair, and I came to a place of healing. That's my ability to be sensitive to the planet. So I go to a place like Las Albercas or Orientalagua, these degraded pieces of land, and I could feel their life potential while also feeling their degradation, because I could accept the pain of the degradation. And that was something that took me a long time to learn. So that's one realm of this that we could explore further. And then the other is that since April of last year, I've been doing morning stretch routines almost every day. And only in the last month did that routine finally get broken. It got broken by Refi Barichara together with all the work we've had to do since. And I'm still doing my morning stretch routines, but I had times where I missed several days. I started getting out of shape. I started losing my sensitivity. And then I had to work really hard to try and get it back, and it's not back yet. It'll probably take me a month of daily stretching to get back to it. Once lost, it is hard to regain. But body-based practice together with deep grieving, it's those two that make this possible. So just thank you for naming this. It's such a big thing. And I'm going to, let's see here, and Roberta. Hi, Roberta. Please, welcome.
Hi, everybody. This is a little bit stream of consciousness, so I just wanted to surface something. So although we're all sovereign, we're also collective, and feeling our way into how to do things together. So there's always tensions in the unknown and trying to feel our way. And one of them that's been there for me, and I think I noticed it in Barichara, and it's continuing, is, there's this real desire to be helpful and be of service there. And, I felt myself just wanting to spend a couple of months immersed in helping, just to understand in my bones more about how these women especially work together, And at the same time, my wheels are turning, and I think many of us are, about our own contexts and our own projects. And I don't want to be a taker, I want to be somebody who's using the knowledge in service of whatever territory there is that I'm working in, and also not extracting. And feeling that tension of not always knowing and having the sensitivity to understand, when it's their time, when it's my time, when it's our time. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. And actually, this is part of a conversation we're having with Benji right now about how to cultivate collaborative finance models. And one of the keys to sovereignty, this is a paradox, is knowing what you have to give up control to actually be sovereign. Because sovereignty is not control of everything. That's actually delusion. Sovereign is knowing our embeddedness and then accepting the open-endedness of that. So I feel like if you have a way to get back to learn from the women here, you should, and then bring it to the place that you need to take it. That the embracing of the mystery and the surrender to that which is greater is a big part of sovereignty. Knowing when to let go. It's like if you're in the rapids and you're getting tired holding on to a branch, it's like part of sovereignty is knowing when those rapids are just stronger than you. And so there's actually a whole spiritual discourse to be explored around what this means. But I think that level one of sovereignty might be, I'm able to be in control of myself. And that's true. Meaning I have decision power. I can set my own course and all of that. But that's true up to a very limited extent to get to the next level of sovereignty, which is embeddedness, which is where real co-creation can occur. So yeah, just totally with you.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I love the word embeddedness. And I just feel like maybe the thing that I'm learning around all the engagements that I have is what's important is staying in communication and being able to be open about these tensions and the things that are, we're not sure about, with grace and all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you, Roberta. Are there any other comments, questions, someone who would like to share? I see Benji's got his hand up.
Yeah. Yeah,
Jump
there's
on
something
in.
what's that?
Jump on in.
All right, I'm in there. I'll try to be anyway. There was just another piece of this that I wanted to bring in, and that is the cultivation of a place of abundance and love within ourselves. So as we try to embed within these larger contexts and adhere to the protocols, surrender to the unknown, if we are really coming from a place of love, we step into sovereignty in such a way that brings more resources into ourselves, answers our own needs, and allows us to then spread that widely throughout the community as well. So I think I just wanted to bring in, just love, abundance, really cultivating that sense, that mode within us as a part of all of this as well. Just wanted to name that.
Yes, amen.
Nice.
I'm curious how you each feel in your bodies about this idea that we will be mobilizing resources for each other. So let's use the example of the bioparque. A lot of people have come to know and love the bioparque because I've been telling its story. And Camila and Vicky are much more famous than they realize. And there was a moment in Refi Barichara where one of them came up to you, I don't know if it was Camila or Vicky, was like, Joe's famous. They're like, where's Camila? It's like, because they have no idea, right? They have no idea who I was before I showed up or who I know. And they're like Camila, you're famous. I'm making you famous. But to think of something like these two women in their mid-70s doing this beautiful work, and we're like, well, yeah, we want to help that. But then we look in our own place, we're like, but we need help in our own place too. And so knowing where to put our energy and our resources is going to be really delicate. But one thing we can know that relates to what Benji just said is how to act from a place of love. Well, you can give some love to Camila and Vicky in the bioparque. Lots of ways that can be done. And that actually will help your own community. And the key is to create a relational field where it's bidirectional. By helping the bioparque, I'm actually, inspiring myself and carrying myself through a difficult time, or I'm doing something purposeful when I feel powerless, or I'm helping gather materials that will be generated because as we document whatever happens next, that'll become stuff I can use to try and convince people where I live, whatever, all kinds of value that we're going to create. And so it's the importance of seeing the value in both directions as we engage in the actions, whatever they are. And so just recognizing that this way of activating bioregions is to undo what colonialism does. Colonialism comes in, kills anyone with a different story, literally, and then steals all their stuff and gives it to only the most ruthless and powerful of that system. That's what I'm sorry, did I say colonialism? I meant neoliberal capitalism, then that thing, all of that's the same thing. And so undoing that is we come in to help each other. We come in with mutual power and mutual respect, mutual adoration and mutual love. And from that place, we actually can help the other and help ourselves, and not in a shallow way, in a deep and profound way. So just want to name that part of this way of activating landscapes and bioregions is going to be to create sustained, like you said, Roberta, we keep in contact, keep in communication with each other. We create human relationships between bioregions. It's going to be really important. Claire, please.
Do you mind if I just emphasize one little piece of that in what you just said that I think is just so important? It's being able to see it. We have to be able to see, and that's so hard. I mean, coming from where we are today, like so much is unseen. We are so profoundly separated. So how do we tell stories in new ways, relate in new ways, reveal our needs in new ways that are authentic and courageous, so that we can just see more? There's so much that we have to reveal. So I just wanted to emphasize that. Thank you.
And with that, we'd love to hear from a community artist who helps reveal what communities don't see. Claire, please.
Hi, thanks. Oh, and I'm so glad you brought that in, Benji. Yeah, I just want to say before I go into what I wanted to bring up was, yeah, to me, if you can feel when there is genuine care and really love, and to me, that's what holds the integrity, because you can't always explain it in ways that people are going to understand. Yeah, and absolutely using community art is like a fabulous way of sometimes helping to make those connections. So, but yeah, the point I just wanted to bring up, and I suppose it was just sharing something personal that really came up for me, Joe, when you were sharing about the unorthodox ways of going about doing a lot of the work that you're doing. And it just reminded me of, you know, I grew up in a really unusual family, and my mother particularly, where as a woman, it was a very chauvinist society. And she just has never, whenever there was an obstacle, she just kind of was very good at being able to kind of pretend she was sort of get away with just like water flowing. She just found a way around. And you know, I have to admit that I think that I watch you and I think, wow, you're way better adapted than she was, because as a parent, it was quite traumatizing sometimes. But anyway, what I wanted to just say was, yeah, we were part of this underground network in South Africa, trying to envision, I was a child, but totally part of that. And we had like all of the thinkers and the people that were trying to imagine this new place and for South Africa. So, and just being very much connected into all of the big things that were really going on. If the system was so corrupted that you couldn't, by adhering to it, you would never have been able to do that stuff. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that in, and just to say it's so cool to hear, to recognize parts of what I grew up with, because honestly, I've never been able to, there weren't many people like my mom that I could even have that conversation with. So, yeah.
Well, before going on to Stephen, I just wanted to say, Claire, in the last week or two, I've noticed the way you've been giving beautiful veneration and love to your mother. It's very clear that you are loving her, that you're grieving the past, that you're holding transitions, that you're in a deep place, and just wanted to honor that. And so really, I see you and I love you, and I want to give you a great big hug. So I just thought I would share. And then on to Stephen.
So you asked, how do we feel? Or I think maybe even specifically, how do we feel in our bodies? And I noticed the stuff that came up for me was not sensations in my body. They were judgments about feeling left behind, lost, overwhelmed, confused, terror. But none of those are feelings in my body. Those are emotions, the language, way people describe that. So I was like, oh, what am I actually feeling in my body? And I'm noticing contraction mostly right now. And then I've got stories with those other words that I just listed. And one of the things that I find that I'm challenged with these days is, when is it relevant to share that story? And when is that story just more of a trap or part of the victim abuse triangle and so forth? I suspect many people that I've encountered experience something similar, this lifetime longing for community, and then some sense of fear or betrayal around it. And that's the story that I'm aware of behind the emotions that come up in the sensations in my body. Here, afraid of being left behind because I still don't really see where I fit in, and patterns from the past that I consider highly dysfunctional still, even if they have some benefit, they're just all in my face, including avoiding going to the land over the past few days because I didn't feel well. And always an excuse. And yet there's something that I know in terms of just being on the land.
Mm.
And I know my pattern is to touch something and then withdraw from it so that I can feel like at some speed that I can let my body accompany. And also a pattern to like really make it real for me. Oh, this really is what I want.
Mm. I was just feeling something, Stephen. Just I was feeling a mirroring of what happens to you when you experience your trauma and what happens to Dan when he experiences his. Because he and I have been, swimming in each other's trauma to carry Las Albercas through. And I won't say much about Dan. He can share his personal story himself. And it's not my place to do so, especially when that'll be made public. But I just want to say that for whatever reason, when he feels that abandonment and fear, he sacrifices himself and jumps in. And that's what he's done to get through to this point. And I feel like there might be a really nice series of walks on the land that the two of you have with each other, because there's this compatibility in the difference and friendship that I see there. And so I just wanted to name that without going into any more depth, because it's not my place to say more, but just that it is indeed this vulnerable and intimate to do this work. It is exactly this vulnerable and intimate to do this work, which is why most will not become sovereign. Because sovereignty doesn't mean that all these reactions don't happen. We're still messed up human beings. But that we find the place to choose from a sort of intention that is true to ourselves instead of reacting to those patterns with enough consistency, not 100%, just with enough consistency that impacts are achieved. Like purchasing Las Albercas in 2 years is like, I look back and go, this was my biggest spiritual crucible. And in the midst of it was the tiny little thing of my 18-year marriage dissolving. So I give you a sense of context. That disillusion of marriage with Jessica that happened, and the maintaining of my child and relationship with Elise and all of that happened is contained within this much bigger thing. And it's so hard to describe that to anyone. Like, what context could I give where someone else can really understand what I mean from that, unless we're in that journey together? And so the more we're in this journey together, the more we create these shared contexts where I can be like, Stephen, I understand some of what you're going through because we've done some of this together. And, like more of us doing this together is how we're going to get there. So thank you for being vulnerable and for sharing and role modeling this for us. I think it's really important. And I want to just ask if there are any other sharings that anyone would like to have before we close today. So are there anyone who'd like to share before we close? Just to say that what I see us doing now is beginning to move into actions that are dangerous, but not in the simple sense like you could bust your knee or someone could shoot you or those kinds of danger. I mean danger as in I might make a fool of myself. People might think I'm crazy. I mean social context danger, which means we have to step out of the sociological frames to do what's needed until that feeling of danger dissipates. and helping each other in the midst of an absolutely insane background culture. By the way, Barichara is background insane too. This morning I went to the phone store to do some things with my phone, and the woman there just like absentmindedly offered candy to my daughter. And I had to say no, because the adults just think that all kids should just have their teeth rotted out and be addicted to sugar, because the adults are fucking insane. I'm sorry, that's insane. Like the marketing of junk food companies are so strong that an adult right in front of a parent just ignores the parent and just gives candy to kids. That's Latin America with all the obesity and all the stuff here. Putting Elise in school, even in an alternative school, is where she's learned all of her bad habits that we're pushing back against. And it's the campesino families mostly, by the way. So back to that decolonization in the opposite direction. The local campesino culture is trying to make my kid a junk food junkie because they have been completely captured by consumer marketing in that. So just to show like this going against those social norms, like when I said, no, Elise, you can't have that candy that adult is offering you. And then just gently saying to the adult, I don't want her teeth to rot out. Just to give a little like social admonishment. Takes bravery. There's social danger to step out of those scripts. And so the work we're about to do in raising money for projects and collaborating and changing our own lives has social danger. Which is why sovereignty is so important. We have to act from a place of noticing without judging, and then finding our clarity of intention, back to the ACT matrix and pro-social, back to that place of sovereignty, back to that place of decisions serving our true intentions. And the best way to do that is going to be with others, with a social support system. Like Penny said, Dan and I, neither of us could have done this without the other. And actually without Natalia, we couldn't have finished the negotiation. And there's a bunch of things I could say. How Margarita made it possible to negotiate Origen del Agua, and on and on. There are all these stories you've been hearing. Without social contexts that hold these different norms, we will not get there. So the social scaffolding is essential. Yeah, please.
Just and the way that Stephen named sort of the things that come up that get in our way, the things that are so painful, like being able to name those things. Well, I don't really know my place here. Am I really like good enough to be in this? These kind of things have to be named so that with an intention that we're going to move through that and continue on the path. Like somehow I'm going to name this and have support so that I can actually still step forward in the direction of what I want, what matters. So it's like, but we can't just ignore those things. We have to name them and name like the support that we need to help us actually take those steps together. So important. So I'm glad that, that modeling is really important. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. Keep feeling into how this relates to all of our actions on the ground. Like, how does this relate to Cowichan Valley for you, Claire, and the work you're doing? Roberta, what are we going to do with the Ozarks and the Great Plains? We're about to go to Denver and Boulder, and you'll all be hearing about that, and we'll be sharing with you what we're doing. And Antonio's doing beautiful work in Sicily that he doesn't talk much about here. Paula's working in another part of Colombia where we're going to find connections. So, and what Jonathan's been naming about the Great Lakes, where we're starting to do this, feeling into our territories as the speaker, and we are supports to that speaking. And we're going to really find our way into that from here forward by doing this together. So thank you, everyone, for another beautiful call. Looking forward to more to be continued, and onward we go.